So good afternoon to our friends on the East Coast and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. Welcome to today's webinar, Providing the Business Impact of Recruiting, Data that Drives Real ROI. My name is Jessica Oberto, Chief Operating Officer at People Science. If you're new to us, People Science provides talent acquisition advisory services and recruitment process partnering, along with our proprietary software, Hiregate, which is a new HR technology that augments any ATS and provides recruitment data and AI-driven insights you could be missing. You can always visit us at people-science.com to learn more. And please reach out after today's webinar if you have any questions or like to schedule a complimentary strategy session. If you haven't been on any of our webinars before, you'll find out today that these are more conversational between our panel of guests. So if at any point you'd like to include something or ask us a question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to make sure that we get back to you. And now I'd like to introduce to you our panelists for today. First, we have Christine Nicholas, founder and CEO of People Science and Hiregate. Christine has spent over 20 years reimagining how organizations find and engage top talent. Through her leadership, she's built People Science into a trusted partner for companies seeking smarter, data-driven recruiting, and Hiregate, an HR tech platform that brings innovation and clarity to the hiring process. And new to us for our Reimagined webinar series is Joel Lalgee. Joel, widely known for his social media channel, The Realest Recruiter, is a recruitment business owner, content creator, and passionate advocate for elevating the talent industry. With more than a decade of experience spanning agency recruitment, employer branding, and media, Joel brings an authentic voice and real-world perspective to every conversation. He now leads a media training and recruitment company that helps hiring leaders bridge the gap between data, storytelling, and human connection. Through his viral content and his Recruiting is No Joke podcast, Joel continues to inspire thousands to rethink how they connect, communicate, and build trust with candidates. Welcome, Joel.
Good to be here.
Good. And then we also have Lindsay Roundtree, our Chief Talent and Product Officer here at People Science and Hiregate. Lindsay plays a pivotal role in our organization where she partners directly with clients to make sure every engagement exceeds expectations. She leads recruiting teams, integrates cutting-edge HR technology to enhance hiring outcomes, and delivers metrics and market insights that drive measurable business results. Lindsay's expertise bridges strategy and execution, helping clients turn talent goals into real impact. So welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you here. Christine, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jess. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you're having lunch on the East Coast. Good morning on the West Coast. Sorry, I'd like to repeat that because I've been saying it for so many years, right? So typically, and let me just give a big shout out to Joel. Dude, it's so good to see you again. I have been following Joel. If you're not following Joel, follow Joel. He's on everything. He's great on videos, great on podcasts. Look for him on TikTok, certainly on LinkedIn. There's influencers, and then there's guys that sit in the seat and influence. That's Joel. Sits in the seat, does the recruiting, counsels on the recruiting, and really knows his stuff. So I was really happy to meet you. Was it last week that we were in Cali?
Last week, Recruiting Innovation Summit. So it was great.
Yeah.
I got to hear you speak, which was, and I got to introduce you, which was it was a real privilege and honor. So it was great to be there.
It was an honor for me too. And that was my first, and just, it's a lot more than 20 years. It's like over 30 years I've been in recruiting. So thank you for not telling everybody my age, kind of, sort of.
Try not to.
But, I always look at the ERE guys as like the brainstorms and the innovators and the entrepreneurs, right? And a lot of them are way, way out there, but we need like way, way out there solutions anyway. So it was so cool to be there and see these great minds. Not a commercial for them, but in the process leading up to this, I knew we were going to be talking about this topic this month. So I started asking people, how do you show your ROI? So those are some of the things that we're going to put in here today, because I think it's very difficult for talent acquisition to always explain their ROI for a myriad of reasons, right? Because we're almost always reactive, right?
100%.
But when we see layoffs coming and people aren't hiring, who's first out the door? It's always talent acquisition. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunities because we just don't show the data of what we're worth. And it's kind of habitual. I won't even say kind of, it's habitual, right? You tell me, Joel, you're doing your recruiting. Lindsay, you're doing your recruiting. And, how cognizant are you of, wow, this is building value for the company as compared to, I got to fill this job. right? So we're
Yeah, I
hoping.
think it becomes just so reactive, right? And it's like open role. Okay, now I'm gonna work on it, filled it. We're gonna kind of move on to the next thing, and we don't have a lot of the conversations around what's the ROI of the work we're doing. So it's totally relevant.
And it's hard not to be that myopic, but that's really the downfall, in my opinion, in our business, in our profession, because you're working really hard to fill this job. You got the next one coming, and all of a sudden you get a call and you're like, we don't need you anymore.
Hmm.
Like, hello. So what we're trying to do is show the value of what you're doing through your whole recruiting cycle, not just so that you can retain your job, but because you're that important. You know, you'll hear me talk a lot, and thank you for following. I think we have a good amount of followers around with us every month, Joel. And one of the things we try to do is always propagate our profession, because the talent gap is just getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, we're going to look at some numbers in a minute, but it is getting bigger and bigger. And no one's asking Talent Act. No one's saying to Talent Act, how do we close it? They're saying, well, we just don't need you anymore. Or, okay, we need you to work harder and faster and hurry up and get there. So data is the source of that. And I know that data is Lindsay's life. She's recently been appointed Chief Product Officer of Hiregate, which is all about the data. And Jess is always data because she's our COO. So she's like data inundated, we'll say, right? So because we do not have, and I'm sorry, guys, but we don't have labor statistic numbers that we usually go over, let's take a look at what we do have. So I think many people, and this is picked up widely by the worldwide press, Challenger Gray and Christmas, who, by the way, is an outplacement firm. Let me just say that again. They're an outplacement firm. So whenever we look at metrics, we like to consider the source, right? They came out with announcements of job cuts that they've seen. This is the grid that goes from 2022 to October 2025, and look at how that has shot up, right? Even higher than, and just a little bit lower, or I'm going to say maybe a third of a percent lower than what we saw in 2020, even though that's not captured here. So I think that we will see a big change in the amount of job cuts and layoffs. Again, but let's consider the source. So let's take a look at some of the things that Challenger had to say about that. So U.S. employers announced 153,074 job cuts in October 2025. So that's 175% increase from October 24, and the highest in October since 2003. Total job cuts year to date are 1,099,500. That's up 65% over last year and reaching its highest level since 2020. Nearly 450 companies announced job cut plans in October, the highest since March 2025. October's total includes large layoffs in retail, telecom, and we'll look at some of the sectors in a second. Total for October is the highest since 2003. The layoff in October reflects technology disruption similar to 2003's tech-driven changes. Joel, if we compare the two, right? So in 2003, we saw a big jump too because of the technology disruptions. When we saw tech really come into play, cell phones hit the market, things started to change, a big disruptor. So do you see a commonality there too?
Yeah, I mean, according to, I know, like Amazon, for example, I think they laid off 14,000 people. Um, I think a lot of these companies are hesitant to say, hey, this is AI or automation that we're bringing into the business. So they actually said that they were still getting over the overhiring from the pandemic, which was what, 4 or 5 years ago. But it's clear when you look at, I think there's another graph that I saw that showed like the investment into AI and automation, and then it showed that relationship with job losses, and obviously that has something to do, right? There's a lot of restructuring going on right now, a lot of teams rethinking how they're organized, and a lot of these jobs, particularly the repetitive ones, a lot of those jobs seem to be getting consolidated, and at times, people are just laid off. So it's hard to get a gauge on exactly what the reason is, but I think we can kind of put two and two together right now.
Yeah, and I think what we don't have is the JOLTS report or anything telling us jobs added.
Yeah.
So while I appreciate Challenger Gray showing us what they're seeing and hearing as outplacement, and also keep in mind, and we're going to talk about other size firms, but the companies that can afford this are companies that are large of size, right? So considering their base. So let's take a look at the next. Oh, I think another interesting point I don't want to skip over, and it is true. We don't usually see a lot of layoffs in the fourth quarter, so it is unusual to see it right now. Anybody on the panel here or anybody in the audience have an idea or what speculate why we're seeing them in Q4 of this year? Any thoughts? So it's kind of an enigma to me. Like, why pull the trigger right now?
It's a great question. I think some people are doing preemptive planning and making cuts now instead of waiting until the new year just to show some cost savings immediately as opposed to waiting into the new year. But that's just a little bit of what I've heard. I don't have a more in-depth answer on that one in particular, Christine, but I have heard a bit of that with some of the clients that we've been working with and some of the reductions we're seeing them do.
Anybody thinks of that, give us a shout in the chat. At one point there.
Yeah, the
So
only other thing I could think about right now that I hear a lot of, and I've been hearing a lot of it all year, is just uncertainty in general. So I think, um, even things like the government shutdown that we just had. I mean, it's just been another kind of issue that's been on the long list of issues this year, right? We still got tariffs that people are talking about, and so I just think that uncertainty going into the new year, like you said, Lindsay, they're just trying to get ahead of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, I mean, I'm hearing about a lot more companies that are planning to do layoffs too within, this fourth quarter and even going into next year as well, citing uncertain markets, which I'm like, I don't know when there's ever really been a certain market, but obviously we're seeing it play out a lot more.
Well, if the beginning of the year was kind of deer in headlights, right? Everything went into a stall because it was like new administration, tariffs, everything that was going on.
Yeah.
And now now maybe with and AI, of course. I have seen a lot of loosening up with virtually everybody I'm talking to about hiring because they're going, okay, we can't just hold our breath for 5 years because we don't know what AI is going to do. We've got to get our toes in the water. We've got to get in there. So I was, on the positive side, what I'm hoping is we're seeing, companies say, okay, here's our AI strategy. Where does the rest of our staff fit in at this point? Maybe that's one of it, but this is certainly something we'll keep talking about.
Yeah, I
So
think
I'm
I was
sorry.
just gonna say I saw Intel a while back. They laid off a large population, and I think that maybe that was 9 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually started rehiring people because there's job creation when you start to adopt new technology. I think part of the challenge is for people who are looking, people who are on the market, a lot of recruiters that I know, is we don't exactly know what that job creation is going to look like across the board. And so I think that's where it starts to create even more uncertainty, more so from like job seekers and recruiters who are looking for work. But I'm optimistic about that because I think you start to need new jobs, right? Like quality assurance. You start to need people who understand how to build systems and how those systems operate. But it's just hard to know what those jobs are exactly going to be until that technology kind of plays itself out and we start to see, okay, what are the new challenges that are being created with a lot of this technology?
Yeah, and that's that number we don't have. We don't know what new job creation looks like right now. But I am hearing about it. So I think that's, maybe a good sign. So here's what Challenger is saying for where those cuts are taking place. They're saying technology is a big part of it, and that downsizing from them is up highly in September with 141,000 cuts overall in 2025, which I mean really is 141,000. First off, that's not everything. That's what they're saying, but is that really that high in that sector? Probably higher than that sector seen, but I'm not sure that it's really that big a number when you look at the overall size of that demographic that's working. It's interesting to see retail cutting in the fourth quarter. And I'm wondering how much of that is because of AI implementation in retail stores, but that's a pretty hefty part of it. Services cuts 63,000 year to date. That's up 62% since 2024. Kind of not surprising, right? Warehousing 47,000 in October. Yeah, this is interesting as we see that move around. And I think whenever I look at warehousing and It's easier to look at how do you retool these people to work in modern manufacturing and things like that. I think I'm hearing and seeing, at least with 4 different companies that I've been talking to, this gap in like, okay, we know we're not going to need this. We don't really know what we're going to need until the robots are implemented and we follow these new processes, and then we can say what kind of guidance we need. So I think as they're implementing these new tools, these new AI tools, there's that gap. But I think we may see, somebody at ERA was saying, well, we may see them pull a Twitter, right? Where they bring back the people that they let go and now they upskill them and are changing them. I think we're going to see some of that because there's such a candidate shortage across the board. And upskilling really is a real thing that I hope sticks. We're seeing it stick so far, so hopefully that'll happen. Consumer products, 21%, nonprofits, an increase from 2024, 400. Not surprising because so many of the nonprofits have lost so much federal funding, right? It's a scary place to be, I think, in nonprofit right now because talk about not knowing what's going on. And then media news, not surprising, seeing some large cuts there. So again, considering this data is coming from an outsourcing corporation that is focused on companies of size, let's go to what we're hearing from mid-size and smaller companies. So the Washington Post, so I want to say something about the Post. I read the Post every day. There's certain pieces I read every day. The Washington Post definitely leans in one political direction. So it's so interesting because we're going to talk about metrics in a few minutes, right? But metrics can lean too, right? But recent data indicates a slowdown in small business hiring. The Bank of America index shows a 7% decline since September of 25. ADP reports 31,000 jobs lost. Overall, many small business owners remain cautious, awaiting potential policy or economic changes. I think small businesses and mid-size are dependent on the larger organizations pretty broadly anyway. But not all small businesses are suffering. Some are reporting stable or healthy sales despite inflation and tariffs. What this isn't telling us is how many are and how many aren't, because you can't do that with just a survey, right? I'd love to see it done in survey form, but it's not. So let's just talk about ZipRecruiter. Lindsay, ZipRecruiter, would you say their target market and their customers are mostly small and mid-sized too?
I would have said that until about a few years ago, and now I do think that they target a lot of larger sized organizations. The launch of their commercials and their friendliness of getting those to really participate, and I think they saw a really large uptick of candidate flow when that happened, and a larger distribution to some larger organizations. However, their prices have gone up drastically, which also alludes to the fact that you're seeing larger corporations use the product. So.
So ZipRecruiter is saying they're seeing a 63% of more than 1,500 hiring bosses surveyed in September expect to expand their payrolls in 2026. That's a good number. Losing the job market for the first time since the new administration. We're seeing businesses ramp up entry-level hiring, drop degree requirements, and incorporate assessments into their process. That's interesting. Again, considering the source, this is obviously a job board. There's an article that I was reading this morning that I didn't get a chance to put in here that talks about the demographic now of who's going to college. And do you know the number one growing, first off, white men are behind Black women in enrollment in college these days. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And the age situation is showing that, top enrollees in what you would consider your typical out of high school going into college is by a long shot, like 52% is Asian or Pacific. How do I say that? That population, men, and then next to that at like 38% is women, and then it follows suit into white women, then white men, or then Black women. So I'll see if I can push that out. That's probably something good for our marketing team to push out. But I think that's interesting to see. And I think that goes back to what are we seeing as far as who's getting hired and where we're going. Because Joel, remember we talked about this yesterday? What did you say about this? Like, oh my gosh, about entry-level hiring at this point.
I mean, there's been a lot of, I can recall several CEOs, like I think the CEO over at Perplexity said that entry-level hiring is going to be a bloodbath over the next few years. And so I'm kind of hearing the opposite from, at least from what I'm seeing in the media and what they're saying. And what really they're alluding to is AI agents, for example, which is where we're at right now, where you can deploy an agent to do a repetitive task over and over and over. They compare it to having an intern. So I think, when I talk to a lot of people who use agents, they'll say, yeah, it's kind of like an intern, maybe does 70 to 80% of the work that an intern would do. You've got to train it, you got to really show specifically what it needs to do. But that was kind of like that was circling in the news maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago. They were saying that there's going to be like a 20% cut with entry level jobs. Now, but I am seeing the degree requirements are getting dropped because a lot of CEOs now are saying, hey, the degree isn't worth what it used to be, because it's like, who cares? You're just stuffing someone's head with information. Information is widely available with the tools we have now. So I am seeing that drop of that degree requirement. And then the last thing I'm seeing as well is a lot more talk about Gen Z going into the trades and going into some of these hands-on work, because it's seen as, okay, if you get a job as an HVAC technician, that seems like it's going to be resistant to AI in the near future. So there's a lot more interest in those types of roles, at least, from what's being reported in the media.
Well, and there's so much scarcity in those roles. I mean, we need HVAC, we need plumbers, we need construction workers. We need a lot of those pieces, right? So, yeah, I mean, you're looking for so are those trades taking the place of healthcare and IT? That's interesting.
I think it's just this idea, this notion of like the corporate job. I think it's because there's been so much negative news around positions, and a lot of the layoffs you see are in with corporate jobs. I just think that, Gen Z's looking at it and going, why am I going to invest 100,000 in a degree to maybe not get a job, compared to, all right, I'm going to go get my, technical license that maybe takes a year and a half, 2 years to get. And then I'm almost guaranteed a job, because like you said, there's such a shortage. I still think I just think healthcare struggles because they're really still trying to get over the pandemic, right? Where so many people were treated so poorly that they exited the industry. And that's just an industry that just refuses to kind of change like its culture and the way that it markets to people. And so to me, it's absolutely no surprise that there's a shortage of nurses right now. It's scary. I think anyone you talk to in healthcare is like, yeah, we're struggling to hire people, but they're struggling to hire because it's just not an attractive job for people. I think it's seen as highly stressful. You got to work weird shifts. You got to deal with the public, and because of how people were treated during the pandemic, I just think they lost just such a market share of people who are interested in going into healthcare. And obviously, like it's not like a job that you can just be like, oh, I'm just gonna go be a nurse. It's like you have to care about people as well, and you don't want people going into that just because it's a job. So I think that market in particular has such a struggle and a challenge to just adopt with like what people are even looking for in work, and it's pretty scary when you think about it.
And I got to tell you though, the wins in that area. So we have a client, predominantly clinicians. So their term was 166% when we
Wow.
came in to work with them. What's their number now, Lynn?
Oh, geez. I want to say it's in the 30s, maybe
Wow.
35%. And I may be off. It may be less than that even. Sorry, just not a number I've looked at recently, but yeah. But they made some big strides too, Christine. They took it upon themselves to train and uplift. They put those additional layers of positions in place. So, you start at this level, you go through this very intensive training program. We certify you internally. And then there are 6 more stages of this position that you can grow into before you hit the top. So as the gap got larger for them, we worked with them to say, okay, what can we do to improve this? And they really put this amazing training program in place. And it does 2 great things for them, right? It solidifies that they're trained the right way. And it also keeps them close to the organization because they are doing that training and building that trust with them from the beginning. Still a big gap in nursing in particular for them. And I think part of the reason, we saw the mass exit of those in nursing and doctors during the pandemic, and think about how long it takes for someone to get through the education process there. It takes so long to become a doctor or become an RN or any of those things that the gap just got even larger as we wait for those who are still engaged and interested in healthcare to get through the education piece.
Nicole, you got to talk to Lindsay about that. Nicole's asking, how did you get clinicians?
If someone could figure out that and come up with a healthcare solution, I think you can make billions of dollars. But it's a shortage, right? And it's with some of these fields.
Yeah.
I've talked to leaders, and it's I hate to say it, but there's just a detachment from a lot of leaders who are in some of these fields and what's actually going on, particularly with Gen Z and what they look for. A lot more people looking for like things like flexibility and just even having control over your schedule. And I just think that that's a challenge in those fields because they're so short staffed. Um, but you compare it to some of the other industries that have done well. Like I think tech's a great example, right? It just they advertise these jobs as flexible and you get to do work from wherever you want, even though it's really not true. That's how they market it. And so for people who are entering the workforce, why would you look for a job that's super stressful, that you're going to be taxed in, that you're not going to be able to pick your schedule when you have this other kind of view of tech and corporate where you can have flexibility and it's easier and you might get paid more. And so I think it's like employer branding, but then like you said, Lindsay, like actually implementing change and doing something. And a lot of times when I talk to leaders in those spaces, they're like, oh no, we can't do that. We've always done it this way. And always done it that way just hurts right now because there's so much change and it's like you have to do something different. So I love hearing those stories.
Well, and I think too, and you hear me on the soapbox about this, right? But, and we use that particular customer as an example. If you don't have really good systems, and if you're subject to what your ATS is telling you to do, and you don't have the data, you're just running like this and filling jobs. When you change that around and you become proactive, you can kind of see behind the people science people, you can see the recruiting continuum. When you look at it from a distance and you say, okay, wait a minute, how do I fix this? How do I not just fill this job? How do I fix this across the board? I know what these challenges are. Joel, you've mentioned so many of them for clinical and nursing recruiting. But the truth is, as soon as we come in and we present these solutions, we get these big wins. I mean,
Yeah.
huge wins that are consistent. So it's flipping the narrative and then having the data to show that you can do it. You can't go in the back room and make more people, right?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you can now with AI. But let me take that back. You can tell I've been doing this 30 years.
We call them agents.
Yeah, you can't make agents out of everything. You still need people for
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
what you can do is work on the processes, understand who you are, know your EVP, target that market, really hone in and put really good business practices. And we don't do that as a rule in TA. Right? That's like our whole story of people science for 27 years is we can do it because we look at the big picture, we bring the processes, we
It's
solve
huge.
the root challenges, and that's why we get there. I don't mean to toot our own horn, but yeah, it works. I mean, why does it work? That's how. So Nicole, we can talk about how we did that, but a good segue, but I know we don't have Joel for too much longer and want to get to ROI. One last thing, I always follow temporary hiring because for every recession that I've been alive in, there's really good documentation that when temp goes down, hiring follows. When temp goes up, hiring follows. Temp is now up. American Staffing Association is saying they've seen a significant increase just since September and October, enough so that our friends of mine that own temporary companies are reinvesting back into temp when they were moving to other divisions. So it's coming at your perspective. One of the things that we talked about yesterday, right, Joel, was, our country doesn't have the kind of metrics, or so we're making these statements that the reports we've been looking at aren't accurate anyway. What if we could take all of these factors and use those for the survey? If we took the ASA's viewpoint and ZipRecruiter, and now we know that AI can do that. So that's a new job for you, Joel. You can get
I'm
some
on it.
AI. Get on it. Get on it. All right. Let's talk
love it.
ROI. So Jess has presented this many times. Let's have you take a dive and then we'll go from there, Jess.
Well, I think first to get started, right? Talent acquisition has traditionally been seen as a cost center to many organizations. And being able to have the right data and metrics in hand can really turn talent acquisition from a cost center into a revenue builder and trusted partner. But how do you do that? Where do you get started? Well, the first thing we need to think about is data. And I've spoken to people before, after presenting the specific thing on metrics, they're like, I don't really have any reporting. My reporting is very limited. I don't know where to start. There's different reports that are out there. The first thing I would encourage everyone on this call to do is take an inventory of the reporting that you do have. So what reporting are you producing on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? And then looking at what reporting are you still missing, or what reporting is the business asking you for that you don't have? So then you can kind of assess where you're at, where you need to go. The second step would be to look at your tools. How are you collecting data? Who's collecting the data? Right, we are looking at this slide, right? The best recruitment data tools. I would suggest, again, doing an inventory of how you're collecting your data. What tools are you using? Is it your ATS? Is it spreadsheets? Is it a tool like Hiregate, or recruiter and candidate tracking system? And then listing all of those out. But then the most important thing, you want to make sure that the tool's working and that it's effective and consistent and being used correctly across the board. So many times organizations think they have the right data in place, but it can be inaccurate, inconsistent, because there's other factors, right? You can have this report we're getting ready to send out on a weekly basis. You can have the tools, but if you're not training your recruiters how to use those tools effectively, if you're not checking that things are being used, the data means nothing, right? So being able to make sure that everything is in line and checked off, and that your tools, one, are easy to use, because if they're not easy to use, no one's going to use them. So you want to look at data tools that have customizable dashboards. So do they fit your recruiting process? Luckily, we use Hiregate internally for our partnerships, and we're able to customize all the steps in recruiting, decline reasons, candidate statuses, and Hiregate. So it makes more sense for our teams to use it, and then the reporting tells a better story. So customizable dashboards are important in your tool. Again, making sure that they're user-friendly. If something doesn't work or it's too many roadblocks, challenges, people are just going to say, forget it, I'm not doing it. I'm going to stick to my spreadsheet or my notebook. So make sure it's user-friendly. AI and machine learning is super helpful to have in your recruiting or your reporting tools. Reporting, being able to pull out a canned report or have something sent to you on a weekly basis, the automation pieces, so where you're not doing so much of the heavy lifting and it's sending you reports, making your life easier, and including predictive analytics. So having a tool be able to gather the data, report on it, but also be able to forecast for you. So with Hiregate, we can look and see in our previous recruitments, we had to do this much recruiter activity and production to get to this many hires by this date. So that's using predictive analytics in your reporting tool. And most importantly, compliance and security. So being able to ensure that the tool you're going to implement into your system is compliant and secure. And that's always a big question you want to ask if you're doing demos. And being able to provide real-time reporting and data. So a tool that's showing you what happened a month ago, not today, will not be as effective for you. And then also being able to integrate easily into the other systems you're using. So another good example, and I'm not trying to brag on Hiregate, but Hiregate augments any applicant tracking system and has an API, so you can connect it into an ATS. So being able to integrate two systems to show you one full picture of recruiting will give you the true story. Lindsay, anything you want to add into here? Because I know you're the reporting guru on the client side.
I think you covered a lot of it, Jess. I think when we talk about AI and machine learning, there's just still so many questions, concerns, usability, training folks, that has either scared a lot of people off or intrigued a lot of people, like one extreme to the other. And I encourage you that as you're looking at tools that encompass AI or involve AI, look at the ease of use, right? Hiregate's a prime example where we have built AI into different areas of it. But our recruiters don't even know that they're using the AI. They know that the tool's helping them. They know that it saves them 6 hours of time per week. But, that AI was embedded so long ago and improved on the back end without really having to cause disruption. And I think that's something that you need to look at. What is the disruption factor when you bring these new pieces what's the learning curve? What's the intimidation factor? I've looked at a million AI tools in the last couple of months, and we implemented our first AI recruiter as well. a few months ago now. And so I really challenge you to say, okay, is the disruption that this tool is going to bring worth the value it's bringing to the table? And seek those tools that are going to bring you the best bang for your buck, including those AI pieces, but just aren't going to rock the boat as much as you think it's going to, or you feel that it's going to. Because we've done it seamlessly, and it doesn't have to be that hard to put in tools that give you the return you need.
That's a great point. And I know we've also recommended to organizations to see if you can get a pilot for these tools. Everything's changing so quickly and so rapidly. A tool that you sign a year contract for, there could be something better in a month. So try not to limit yourself to long-term contracts and see if you can get a pilot.
Or even, whenever the team brings a new tool on that they're looking for funding for, what's the ROI? I want to know what the ROI is before I'm going to. So if the tool isn't going to tell you what the ROI is, or they're going to give you the data based on what they think. For example, we were working with a company that was using Indeed, and they told us their cost per hire for Indeed was $434. It was more like $1,200 when we did an audit. So understanding how you can measure your ROI, which is today's topic anyway. So take us there, Jess.
Okay. So once you have the data and the reporting in place, and a few slides down, we'll look at some common reports and what the ROI is for them. But the whole point of this is being able to link your metrics and your reporting to business outcomes. We want to show the value of TA and its effectiveness. And one of those strong points to build with the business is impact on revenue. So being able to look at the new hires that your talent acquisition team has brought into the organization versus how much they're bringing in as far as new revenue goes. That's a big one for the business. That will impact them greatly.
And nobody talks about this, but when you do it, it makes an incredible difference. It really builds the value of recruiting. And it's not as hard as you might think, too. I mean, if you just get your arms around it and you go back and look at your hires, who's producing and who isn't. I mean, you could have 5 bad hires and one that's out producing everybody to the point where it doesn't matter, right? But imagine going into a hiring manager or going into your quarterly review or talking when your division or your group or leadership is looking at profit loss and say, don't forget that our team brought $6 million in revenue in by getting these kind of candidates hired and in the pipeline. It's a huge differentiator. And we don't do it. Does anybody know anybody who does this? I mean, we do it at People's Night. Does anybody else know? It's always amazing to me that no one knows this. It's like a big secret, right? Or can't be quantified. Everything can be quantified.
Sure. Similar to that, you can show how much productivity your new hires have brought in to the team. So looking at a before status and an after status, especially when your team's done a big focus on key hires, building a new sales function, and then looking at top talent and how they have assisted to innovation and growth of new products within the company since they're hired. This is important, particularly for telecommunications companies, tech. Being able to show that growth and significance of what your talent acquisition team, the talent that they brought in.
And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but I've got to also say it's not just who's been hired. There is so much gold in your pipeline. There's so much gold in the conversations that you have with candidates and with applicants that are never hired. My favorite example is we were looking at a company who was looking to put a product, their typical virtual aid, and they went to put a product into brick and mortar, and they were looking for somebody to lead this retail group for them. And in the interview process, I personally met with a fellow who was like, why are you going to do that? Here's a better solution. And he said, go kiosk, changed the whole model, saved millions of dollars. They never hired that guy. He didn't even want the job. The idea came from the recruiter in the seat who bubbled the information to me. Amazing. How many times are you doing that as a recruiter, sitting in the seat talking to a candidate, learning about what products are out there? Especially if you're interviewing right now people in tech or in AI, what are they working on? How's that going? And you just encapsulate this data. This is why we have Hiregate, by the way, because as an RPO, we have to constantly show our worth, right? So when you put that data in there and then you take it to product, all of a sudden we can't afford to lose Lindsay. Look at what you just did for us. So you're building your value, you're building your ROI, you're not just quantifying it. You're helping create new products and product development. Or look at it this way, if you're in your pipeline, we had a large retailer, we've had a lot of B2Cs and a lot of retailers that have said, we've thrown a question in there. What do you think as a telecom, if we started to introduce burglar systems, is it something you would buy? So now we're validating or devalidating what marketing is thinking and what product is thinking. Because it's better than any of these cadres that they put together, these little marketing groups, because your candidate is your customer, so they're going to tell you. Mm. Look at the power that we have, and we don't even use it. Still having the conversations. All you do is add an extra question. Sorry, Jess, got carried away.
That's good. So what is the ROI of your TA investments? Being able to go back and compare how much it costs talent acquisition to hire, bring in the talent versus the benefits of that new talent. So being able to highlight revenue increase due to hires and also reduce turnover cost, right? So if your team's bringing in quality hires that are in alignment with your company's missions, your EVP, that's going to reduce turnover as well. And then really showcase your cost savings. Show how talent acquisition has had an impact on reducing reliance on hiring managers going to contingent hiring because they trust their talent acquisition team. They know that they're in alignment with the business and that they're going after the right candidates for the company. Also, being able to streamline talent acquisition processes through technology. So being able to shorten the time to hire, reduce the cost to hire. All of those cost savings will have a big impact on your leadership. Really anything that has to do with quality, time, and cost is really going to get the attention of your executive leadership. And Joel, I know you need to jump in 3 minutes, so I want to let you hop in and kind of share your thoughts on this. Are there any types of metrics or reports that you feel have made a big impact for you?
You know, I think in just, I mean, all the points you're making are amazing, right? And I think if I was to sum up my major takeaway, and even just looking at the metrics, and I kind of have a little bit of a head start because I know what the metrics are because we discussed it before. But I think as you look at the metrics, I think one piece that's massive is it's really building relationships within the business and from a perspective of knowing the business. And I think this is where this is a huge challenge for HR and recruiting. I think anytime leaders outside of HR and recruiting and talent acquisition get asked like where is HR and TA kind of falling behind, a lot of times they're saying that we're not strategic enough. And really what that boils down to is really understanding the business, which I get is a challenge when you're in a seat where you're filling positions that maybe you're not an expert in, or you're working with leaders who have more experience with you. But this is a great use case for AI as well. Like AI is so good at understanding trends and data, and it can do a lot of the work for you and almost like coach you up. But I think if you're not going into conversations, like you said, Christine, earlier, with like that storytelling, but it's like storytelling and building those relationships and building trust. Because I think like it's great to have this ROI, it's great to have all of these metrics, and that's important. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a relationship and they don't trust you and they don't trust that what you're saying is real and it matters, um, I think that is just it's a huge piece, and I see it a lot. I think if you're a leader out there and you have a team, it's not just saying, okay, this recruiter has 2 years experience. You know, they're not doing a good job with the hiring managers. It's coaching them up to be able to have those conversations and have that confidence as well. Like I think there can be a lack of confidence that we have as recruiters where because we're reactive, because we're filling roles and no one's ever really happy, right? Candidates aren't happy, hiring managers aren't. We got to bridge that gap, and a lot of that is trust, relationships, going into conversations, and knowing and believing like you're the expert. I know the market. I know the talent that's out there. I know where to find the talent. I just think it's just such a huge piece. I just want to encourage you guys out there, if you're feeling like, oh, it's hard to have these conversations, use AI. Like if you go into a conversation and you have a full report and you know the market before a kickoff call, it just elevates that trust that they're going to have in you. So when you start to delivering candidates and you start having those strategic conversations, you've got that equity. So I think it's looking at these metrics, understanding them, and then proactively putting that together to tell that story and just going in prepared, not waiting for that hiring manager to tell you what the market's like taking ownership of that. So, and it's obviously something I'm passionate about. It's something we talk a lot about at conferences. But it's a massive edge that we have right now. It's to get ahead of what AI is and what it's doing, and grab a hold of it and start using these tools to elevate ourselves within the business and just understand the business working in at the end of the day. So that is my major takeaway, and I'd encourage any of you guys too. I have a podcast, Recruiting is No Joke. I'd love for you guys, if you want to be a guest on it, to reach out to me. But I'm having these conversations each week with internal leaders that are kind of talking about a lot of these things. How do we elevate? How do we become more strategic? So I encourage you guys to listen to that. And then Christine, Lindsay, and Jessica, great to be on here with you. And if there's follow-up questions that you guys get, feel free to forward those over to me as well.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Joel.
Thanks for
thank you,
being
Good to
Joel.
see
on.
you.
All right,
You're a
guys.
superstar. We're sending you a Juggernaut t-shirt.
Yes.
So, yeah, we got to get you a Juggernaut t-shirt.
I
Talk to
love
you
it.
soon.
All right. We'll
All
talk
right.
soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
So he's great, right? I mean, it was great having him on. If you don't follow him, he's very interesting. He's what I call edutainment, right? He's not hard to follow. It's good to stay captivated. Keep in mind, we're going to send you this deck, but when you think about the metrics that you are collecting now, these are some of the metrics that we use to start the story. So in other words, to go in and say, this is how much I saved us on the cost of advertising is a good story, but you need to turn that into your whole ROI, right? So we are going to send this to you, but these are some things that you really should track. And by the way, some of the resistance that I hear out there from recruiters is, well, I don't have time to record it. You are recording it. You're recording it in your brain, or you're putting it in Excel, or it might be in your ATS. Some of it might be in your ATS, some of it might be in your CRM, some in your recruitment marketing. There's data all over the place. And to Jess's point, I mean, we have the ease of use of Hiregate. And I will tell you that today I'll offer Hiregate as a tool for 6 months for usage for anybody on the webinar who wants to start to collect their metrics. You'll need to just reach out to us. Can somebody, Lindsay, you want that to go to your team? I'm gonna
Yes,
drop that through to your team. So if you just
please.
want to put a contact thing in the chat that they can use to contact you. Our recruiters use it. We'd like to get some more outside influence. We've had clients ask us to bring it to market, so it is now on the market. But like I said, I'm willing to give it to some of our followers free to get your take and to help you build that ROI so you can tell the story. Let's take it out of this. You should just be filling jobs and you should just be reactive. You've already got the data. Let's get it centralized. However, if you do have some good AI tools and you feel like you've got this data in Excel spreadsheets and you don't want to try Hiregate, bring an AI tool in that can take you across the board, look at all these different sources that you have, and then have them propagate the information. I trust Hiregate more, but you can go ahead and look at just like, oh, we got AI can do this for you. There are instances where there's tools that can do that, but I don't know if they stretch across all of your platforms and what the investment is. Okay. Source of engagement. So where are these candidates really coming from? I mean, right now it's the end of the year. We're looking at our clients' LinkedIn spend because in some cases we manage their LinkedIn spend and in some cases they manage it. And it's always amazing to me how much is spent on a certain tool, and then we really don't know how many candidates. So it might be pulling a lot in, but how many are we actually engaging, especially because candidates have this wide variety of AI tools that they can use to mass distribute their resumes, right? So really understanding not just your source of where did they come from, but how many of those you're engaging. The source of hire, and then bubbling it all the way down to where did the hires come from. Now, caution Will Robinson on this one. Just because it worked for this hire or for these 10 hires doesn't mean 2 months later it's going to work for another hire, because we know that job boards and sources change, and the candidates, by the way, float from one to the other. Might be heavy on LinkedIn today, might be heavy on Indeed tomorrow. So they're good guideposts, but they're not the end all. Decline reasons. This is one of my favorites because not a lot of people collect that. But when, and I'm sure as recruiters, most of us can relate to, nobody wants this job. And that's because the salary isn't good, or nobody wants this job. I'll tell you, working with one of the FANGs, when we came in, they're like, everybody wants to work here, but we can't get these positions filled. We're like, yeah, you're right, everybody wants to work here. Then we came back and what's the number, Jess? The people that didn't want to work there. It was like
Big
crazy.
number.
It was a
Yeah.
big number. And so we started to click, well, why don't you want to work here? And the fines were really interesting. It was a geography issue. And what we were able to do is coach them to up higher in several other geographic markets to get them there, because they were never going to get there from where they were. So this is decline reasons will tell you why people really are. It'll help you validate your EVP or devaluate your EVP. But it's important that because we're always working with people, that you collect the data and then take a look at it objectively, because we all kind of come in saying everybody wants this job or nobody wants a job. Let's look at the numbers to tell you that. The cost
And the
of bond,
decline reasons are important both at the candidate portion of the process and the applicant portion, because they do tell a different story. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of that one, Christine, for, you know, having the luxury of Hiregate, I'm able to see those declines for both different sets, and they tell where, when you unite them, they tell a great story, but you will find that they will be different. Those applicants that decline will look very different than those who never made it to apply. Their story will tell you something different.
interesting, I'm sure. And you know, and maybe it has to do with where they are in the whole pipeline to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Cost to find, again, kind of self-explanatory, but cost of vacancy, that calculator is on our website. You're welcome to use it. Maybe Lindsay or Jess can populate that link in there so that you have it. But I will tell you that cost of vacancy is a very, very powerful tool. But if you really want to talk about your ROI, start to show them how much it costs every day a position is open. So if let's say for an example, the average customer service position that's open costs the company $338 a day, and you are able to shorten that time to fill by 30 days, look at how much you just saved the whole organization, right? Candidate conversations, we just talked about this, finding out what, you know, understanding your business objectives, and then taking data back to the business that you found during your discovery process. Your recruiter production, you want to tell the story. This is how hard we've worked for you. Do you really want to lose somebody who's done this kind of work? I mean, if you know that you're hitting the pavement hard, your team's hitting the pavement hard, looks really good what you're doing on your side, but nobody else understands that because they don't understand what recruiter production is, let alone what you're doing, then it's easier to just take you off their P&L. That's what we're trying to protect. When they say your name on the P&L, they're like, wait a minute, there's a lot more value here. And the P&L actually reflects that. Your time to interview, your quality of hire, there's a lot of talk about quality of hire, but how about tying it back to recruiters and the processes that you're using? At worst, this will help you get better at what you're doing, just collecting the data. And then offer to close rate. So often this is a misnomer, right? That offer to close rate is just kind of you're subject to what you know, in the end, the job, the salary was just off or whatever. But the way a recruiter manages that has a lot to do with whether or not they stay or go. So if it's costing you about $3,000 to get a candidate into the pipeline and all the way up to the offer rate, and your offer rate is higher, have you not just saved the company $3,000? You are worth it. You need to show it. And you do that by collecting it, right? Collecting it, telling the story, and taking it from there. Anything else from Lynn, Jess?
Again, I think it's just using the data and the metrics to tell the story. And like Joel said, having that trust with the business is important. And I feel like having this data for the recruiters is really empowering for them. So they have the confidence to have those conversations. They can speak to recruitment eloquently and have numbers that back them up. Because I really think at the end of the day, like we always say here, emotions lie, numbers don't. And sometimes when you're working with a hiring manager, that could be very technical. I think when you get down to the numbers, that's something that the two of you can connect on. So being able to pull in the data, tell the story, and give the recruiters confidence and empowerment to really feel, you know, like they know where they're going with their recruitment strategy as well. So that's what's super important to me.
I think the difference between reality and the want is there's a gap sometimes, right? So hiring managers want these things, they want these types of candidates, they want these options, but as recruiters, if we're collecting the data and we're using the AI tools we're being given, we can level set from the very beginning. In reality, this is what your market looks like. Here are the numbers, like Jess said, because they don't lie, that back up this information. This isn't a theory or a thought or a nice to have. These are the facts. So arming ourselves with the data arms us with the facts. And that really allows us to set a clear expectation from day one, which in turn builds that trust with the business from day one. If you can work backwards from that and really get to that great place of day one, the success you'll have with the business, the success your recruiters will have with the business will only grow over time because that trust is established and you're proving yourself with the metrics you're armed with.
There's a comment in here from Amber Myers too. Does anyone collect cost of avoidance where you take your new hires for the quarter and apply a 20% fee to the salary to show what it would have cost if an agency was used?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Good one, Amber.
We've done that before too. We had one client that we came in, they were scaling up quickly for sales specialist, and they really had no recruiting function when we joined with them. And it turned out that they had hiring managers that had each pretty much had their own contingent recruiter that they were friends with. And they were just going to them every time to bring in a new salesperson. So over a year, we were able to save them about $3 million in contingent spend by having recruiters in place that were working closely with the business, really understood the EVP. These were hard salespeople to bring in. We had a candidate recruitment marketing plan in place. So being able to then show them the cost of having our team in place versus the cost of the contingent hires is very eye-opening for the organization overall. And they decided at some point to just build their own internal TA function. So I think in the long run, that saved them millions and millions of dollars.
That's cool. This is such a great time to be in talent acquisition if you can get your arms around everything, because the talent gap is so significant. But I think if we keep playing the same old part, if I get the rec, I fill the job, I go from there, I give the reports I'm supposed to give. I mean, really, I say this too in our orientation when we bring new people on, but who knows more about finding talent than you? Right? You know more than I'm just gonna go out and say 99% of the world on how to find talent. So it's really time for us to feel empowered, to count what we're doing, bring it to the table so that people understand that we're the ones that need to be asked. Any last words, guys?
It's such a juicy topic for us. It's hard to think of something quickly and short to say. But again, I think the most important thing for organizations to do, or if you're a talent acquisition leader that you just feel like your reporting's a mess today, do that assessment of what you have in place, the tools that you have, the types of reporting that you need or that's being asked of you from the business. You can always reach out to us at People Science for a complimentary strategy session. Lindsay and I work on reporting every day with our clients, so we're always happy to sound out the challenges with you and give you direction, best way to move forward.
My recommendation would be go to your recruiters and ask the hard questions. What data do you use the most? What data is missing? What would you like to see? How can we help you build that trust and establish those relationships you're seeking at the recruitment level? Survey them. Send them a survey monkey if you don't want to have those conversations one-on-one. Give them options of tools you're looking at that you're considering. Help empower them to empower you.
Cool. And finally, we have a last page here that's standout metrics, what they mean, what does it mean to your ROI? Because we are going to have this deck available. Do we send this out to participants or they pick it up from the website, Jess?
What we'll do is we'll send you a link to the recording from today's webinar. And when you go to the website with the link, you can download a copy of this PDF.
Cool. So just a little grid that you can use on your own. I want to say thank you for attending. Great minds are what gets us there. Always happy to hear what people have to say. Any questions, we do a lot of free consult. We always offer a free 15-minute consult for the companies or the recruiters that we work with to help get to another level. And looking forward to hearing of your interest in Hiregate. So reach out to Lindsay, and Lynn, keep me plugged in on that so I know what's going on. We'll see you next month. We've got some pretty interesting stuff going on. It could be that we're meeting with somebody who has collected and is creating dossiers on every single person who's working. His name is Jeff Taylor. He's the founder of monster.com. What a guy. Really interesting. Not sure if he's going to join us in December or January, but we'll be talking more about his new project in December. Have a great Thanksgiving. Talk to everyone soon. Bye now.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.